country is facing.
Does this mandate make sense?
That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. That means a civil, contextualized conversation with perspective.
CBS News, 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
Tonight, a late summer heat wave is sweeping most of the country. When will it feel like fall? And the latest on an intense manhunt for an escaped convicted killer. Then, with student loan payments about to resume, the difficult decisions facing borrowers on the CBS Evening News.
Congress needs to do their job. Balance a budget.
Leader McConnell will speak after me here on the floor, and I'm glad to see him back and doing well.
We hear all the time about how Bidenomics is supposed to be working, but I said on television yesterday, nobody's buying Bidenomics.
And as the overwhelming evidence will show, he is not fit to be the Attorney General for the state of Texas.
Hello, I'm Nancy Cordes in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. Well, the Senate is back in session after the August recess, and Congress is facing a looming deadline to avoid a government shutdown. Lawmakers now have less than a month to pass spending bills that would keep the government funded, but conservative Republicans are pushing for new deep cuts, and they want more funding for some of their priorities, like a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. The White House is calling on congressional Republicans to commit to funding the government without those conditions. For more on all of this, Christina Ruffini and Scott McFarland join us now. Christina is a CBS News correspondent. She's at the White House. And Scott is CBS News congressional correspondent. Welcome to you both. I want to get to that spending showdown in a moment, but a few health matters to discuss first. So, Scott, let's start with you and with Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who is back in D.C. with the rest of the Senate today. And a short time ago, he made an oblique reference to that episode where he appeared to freeze up a few days ago when speaking to reporters. Let's listen to what he had to say about it on the Senate floor.
Now, one particular moment of my time back home has received its fair share of attention in the press over the past week. But I assure you, August was a busy and productive month for me and my staff back in the Commonwealth.
So acknowledging the issue, but not really addressing it head on or answering any questions. Scott, is his office providing any more information about what might be ailing him?
His office is speaking through the Office of the Attending Physician, Congress's in-house doctor, releasing two statements over the past few days, one of which last week didn't quiet much of the questions or the concerns because it acknowledged the physician hadn't actually examined McConnell directly. But in a statement today, the physician says he did examine McConnell and some MRI results and has ruled out a seizure disorder, a stroke, or Parkinson's. What the Office of the Attending Physician has said over the past few days is what we've seen could be consistent with dehydration and complications from the concussion, a severe concussion McConnell suffered in March at a D.C. hotel fall. McConnell had a chance to answer any number of questions today. We were there. We were peppering him with questions. He didn't take them or address them. And you characterized it quite well, Nancy. He answered it only obliquely during his expected Senate remarks today.
I noticed that one of his Republican colleagues, John Cornyn, said that McConnell wants to be more transparent, but apparently that hasn't happened yet. Perhaps it will happen, Cornyn said, tomorrow when Senate Republicans sit down for their weekly lunch. On another health matter, Christina, the First Lady, was diagnosed with COVID yesterday. This afternoon, we saw the president wearing a mask at a Medal of Honor ceremony, although he didn't keep it on the entire time. What is the White House saying about the First Lady's condition and about testing for the president?
That's right, Nancy. So at the briefing, we were asking many questions about what the protocols are going to be since he and the First Lady were together all weekend in Florida. They were in Florida on Friday touring that hurricane damage. Then they were at their Delaware beach house over the weekend. The First Lady tested positive on Monday. The president returned to the White House. She's still there in isolation. But obviously, they were in very close contact. So the press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, said today that the president, since the president was with the First Lady yesterday, he will be masking while indoors and around people in alignment with CDC guidelines. And about 30 minutes after she said that, we saw the president at this Medal of Honor ceremony where he wore a mask as he entered the room, took it off to make his remarks, and then didn't put it back on to be into close contact with the other octogenarian who was receiving this award. So we've reached out to the White House for comment as to how that kind of works with what we were told the president was going to be doing. We've yet to hear back. The other issue is the president has scheduled a big diplomatic trip to Asia. He's going to go to Delhi for the G20 and then to Vietnam, at least he's supposed to, on Thursday. Now, the question hanging over this trip is, will the president stay healthy enough? Will he test positive between now and that set departure on Thursday? We also asked the White House how often he's testing, what the cadence of testing is going to be leading up to that trip. And they wouldn't comment. They said he's tested negative in the last 24 hours. Once in the morning, once in the evening. And we said, is that going to be, is that going to be the procedure? Is that going to be, we're going to continue seeing those tests 2 times a day? And the press secretary wouldn't tell us. She said that testing will be up to the president and his doctors.
Yeah, I guess they're taking a wait-and-see approach because they also won't tell us whether the vice president, who's already in Asia, will end up pinch hitting for the president in India and in Vietnam if he does test positive sometime in the next few days and can't make that trip. All right, Scott, let's turn to the increasingly real potential of a government shutdown. What are conservative House members demanding in exchange for their votes to keep the lights on? And how is the Senate reacting now that it's back?
We're 25 days from the deadline, and there's still no sense of anybody trying to merge or find consensus here. There's 2 different areas in which Republicans and Democrats are differing at this moment. The overall dollar amount. House Republicans want to chop it down by tens of billions of dollars, but also some of the language they've included in the House bills, just non-starters with Democrats in the House and in the Senate. Cuts to climate change initiatives, diversity programs in the federal government, money that orders increases in the spending on the border wall, that Trump campaign idea from 2016, which continued through his administration. Our reporting shows that the next bill the House is going to take up and try to pass is this Homeland Security spending bill, about $62 billion worth. That includes all those things I just mentioned, border wall money and cuts to climate change initiatives and diversity programs. They're not going to get Democratic votes for this when it goes to the House floor, if it clears the Rules Committee 1 week from today. But even if it did, it's a non-starter in the Senate. So we get perilously close to the September 30th deadline, and both sides are just digging in to a messaging argument and bills they know aren't going to pass the other chamber, which reminds me an awful lot, Nancy, of that debt ceiling standoff, which went down to the final hours.
Right. And I was going to say, if it seems familiar to people, this fight that we're watching play out, it's because we did just watch it play out. In May, there was a protracted, painful negotiation between the White House and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, where they set spending limits for the next couple of years so that we wouldn't watch what we are watching right now, and yet it is happening anyway. So, Scott, it would seem that the House Speaker is now in a major bind here. He just cut this deal with the White House in May. Now conservatives want him to break the deal. If he goes along with them, it'll undercut his ability to negotiate in the future. But if he doesn't accommodate them, they could sink his speakership. How real is that threat?
There is a needle he has to thread. You characterized it well, but what's clear to me, more people I talk to as these days go by, is there is a case of buyer's remorse from some of these Republicans for the deal Speaker McCarthy cut to avert the debt ceiling crisis. And they have been looking to atone for that ever since. Here comes September 30th and a deadline for a government shutdown, which by all accounts, especially from House Republicans, would have less pain, immediate pain on the U.S. economy. They're spoiling for a fight that is now quickly approaching.
Christina, turning to foreign affairs, you asked the White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan today in the White House briefing room about the news that Russia may be seeking weaponry from North Korea, of all places, and that Putin and Kim Jong-un might actually meet to discuss it later this month. What did he tell you? And does North Korea even have a large stockpile of weapons to give Russia in the first place?
Well, that was my question, and I didn't know if it was a dumb question or not, but Sullivan said it's something the U.S. intelligence is actually looking into because it's unclear how many weapons, what kinds of artillery they would have, and the quality of that artillery. But the follow-up question, we asked was, is this enough weaponry, or is this enough artillery to impact the outcome of the war one way or the other? And this is the answer he gave us. I think we've got it for you.
Our visibility into both the question of quantity of stocks and then, of course, quality of stocks is somewhat constrained, but it's something that we will continue to look at carefully. I think there is an open question about how much material and what the quality of the material is that could be provided if it were to be provided. And then I think it says a lot that Russia is having to turn to a country like North Korea to seek to bolster its defense capacity.
But Sullivan did say, look, these discussions between the North Koreans and the Russians, U.S. intelligence believes they are real, they are progressing. It's not clear yet if it's a matter of really wanting this material support or if it's a matter of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? You have these two nations who are pretty much isolated. You know, they're antagonistic with the United States. It may be more of a diplomatic antagonistic move more than an actual military asset. But either way, it's something the U.S. is intensely watching, and we'll have to see what comes of it.
Right, definitely speaks to how few friends Russia has in this fight, if it's turning to North Korea at all. Christina Ruffini and Scott McFarland, thank you so much. Well, it was a busy Labor Day weekend on the campaign trail, and today a few of the 2024 Republican presidential hopefuls are crisscrossing New Hampshire. We're going to take you to the Granite State next. You're streaming America Decides.
If it's important to our nation,
I wonder how you think about where America is at this moment.
it's on Face the Nation.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education.
Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
I always tell people that Twitter would not be Twitter without Black Twitter. It's just us being in fellowship with each other.
And it becomes a conversation you don't want to be left out of.
People really started to recognize the power of activism on Twitter.
Based on that one tweet, the hashtag #OscarsSoWhite was trending around the world.
If anything has really powered Black Twitter, it's been humor.
If your food ain't right, we're going to tell you about that, too.
We tend to create change, create culture and cool.
That's how movements happen on Black Twitter and go beyond more than that.
Black Twitter, the Twitterverse that changed a generation. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme,
the threat of severe weather and dangerous tornadoes is expected to last.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Let's bring in our partners at the Weather Channel.
Now 6 feet of water, imagine that. Cars that can act like battery lamps.
These hyper-realistic simulations show you what the weather will look and feel like before it happens.
Feel the forecast, streaming on CBS News.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
The carnage in our nation's schools has become painfully repetitive.
Not one more child!
School shootings have parents fighting mad.
I promised my daughter I was going to fight. It's going to keep on happening.
And teachers taking lessons in how to fight back.
This is an exercise.
We approach it as it's you or them.
It shouldn't have to be your teacher's job to protect your life.
But will the battle over gun control,
people are afraid that they're going to lose their gun rights altogether,
be the hardest lesson of all?
The exercise, you're having to shoot at an adult. Are you prepared to have to kill one of your students?
Guns in the Classroom, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She's the most successful alpine skier, male or female, ever, and a worldwide inspiration.
We need a lot of women doing sports really, really well.
The story of Michaela Schifrin's game-changing reign at the top of the slopes when we go person to person.
Frankly, Donald Trump and others that vie for this nomination have the same policy as Joe Biden, walking away from a commitment to fiscal responsibility.
We can't just criticize the so-called radical Biden agenda. Of course, there's everything in the world wrong with it, but that's not enough. That's why I think that's actually why we didn't succeed in 2022.
Welcome back to America Decides. You were listening to a couple of Republican presidential candidates, former Vice President Mike Pence and entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, making their pitches to New Hampshire voters this weekend. This as former President Trump continues to hold a commanding lead in the polls. In fact, a new Wall Street Journal poll found 59% of Republican voters say that Trump is their top choice. That number is an 11-point jump from April. CBS News reporter Kara Cordy joins me now from Claremont, New Hampshire. She has been crisscrossing the state covering these candidates. Kara, good to have you with us.
Thanks, Nancy.
So Labor Day weekend, the traditional kickoff to the political season. A number of candidates have been in New Hampshire. In fact, just today, former Vice President Mike Pence had some interesting things to say about populism. Was that a veiled swipe at his former boss, Donald Trump?
It's a very interesting thing to hear from Mike Pence, Nancy, because I think the beginning of his campaign, he's had to kind of straddle this line behind supporting Trump-Pence policies that he supports 100%, as he says, out on the trail, but also, namely because of January 6th, trying to point out how he's different from his former running mate. Let's take a listen to what he said today.
Well, I believe that now we have a choice our party is facing, whether we're going to produce leadership that is grounded in that timeless conservative agenda that's defined our movement for more than 50 years, or whether we're going to follow the siren song of populism and move our party away from those same principles.
So Mike Pence here is talking about a philosophical difference that he sees in the Republican Party. What's really interesting, Nancy, is that the vice president is going to make a huge policy speech, they're billing, tomorrow in New Hampshire. And just moments ago, his campaign operatives were on a call with CBS News in which they said not only do they think Donald Trump is more in line with populism than conservative values, they also named Tim Scott and Nikki Haley as well.
That's interesting. Well, it'll be intriguing to hear what he has to say in that foreign policy speech. By the way, Nikki Haley, since you mentioned her, she's got an event coming up tonight in New Hampshire. Are you sensing any new momentum for her after her debate performance a couple of weeks ago?
I think so, Nancy. Voters I talked to here really like two things about Nikki Haley. The fact that she was a governor, so she has experience being the executive of a state, but also she was ambassador to the UN, so she has a lot of foreign policy experience. She's trying to capitalize on that today, given the news that Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un met, releasing this very forceful statement saying that the Kim-Putin partnership is another sign that dictators of the world are united. The tyrants who lead China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea hate America and our values. She goes on to say we must take their threats seriously. Neither Joe Biden's weakness nor Donald Trump's friendliness to Kim have changed North Korea's direction for the better. These dictators only understand strength. That's the message Nikki Haley is going to deliver here tonight.
And yet, Kara, you know, as you crisscross the state, you look at that Wall Street Journal poll that puts Trump at 59% in the GOP primary. Is the sense there that this race is already over?
Certainly not from the candidates, Nancy. Of course, they're never going to tell you that. They believe in themselves. When I talk to voters, though, there is a real fear and trepidation when you talk to folks that do not want to support Donald Trump. They know they're not going to support Joe Biden. They're wondering who is going to rise to the top here. Some folks I talk to say they're worried that there are too many Republican candidates going to splinter the field and lead to Donald Trump getting the nomination once again. Other names I hear pop up a lot is Vivek Ramaswamy. A lot of folks say that they like his young energy. They think that he can lead the party to something new.
You know, when you talk about all the candidates in the field, I want to play for you what former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan had to say about just that issue this weekend on Face the Nation. Take a listen.
I think there's too many people in the field. You should not be in the race. If you don't make the debate stage, you likely should consider getting out. If you're on the debate stage and you're willing to stand up and challenge the leader, that's at 50%. If you're unwilling to challenge Donald Trump, you should get off the stage. You know, Ramaswamy, for example, is up there being a cheerleader and a fill-in for Trump.
So he's saying, Kara, that Ramaswamy maybe should get out of the race, but you're saying that actually some folks in New Hampshire are giving him a new look.
There's a lot of enthusiasm behind Ramaswamy here, especially when you see people wearing his hats or passing out his bumper stickers. They're young people, so that's really interesting. Other third-party candidates, you don't really hear a lot about here, Nancy. except sometimes there's one exception, and that's for Democrat Robert Kennedy Jr. Some folks I spoke to last night at a Mike Pence event said that they're waiting to see him when he comes to the state later this week.
Intriguing, the Mike Pence Kennedy crossover voter. That is an interesting cross-section. Kara Cordy in New Hampshire, thank you so much. A panel of federal judges has blocked Alabama's latest attempt to redraw their state's congressional map. The judges say the state failed to create a second majority black district as the Supreme Court had ordered. Now, a special master will be tasked with creating the map independently. Alabama's Republican Attorney General has said the state will appeal the decision. The historic impeachment trial of Texas's Attorney General is now underway. We'll take a closer look at the case and what might be in store for Ken Paxton after the break. You're streaming America Decides.
An original documentary from CBS Reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless the USA.
George Santos' campaign was a campaign of deceit, lies, fabrication.
And who is he, really?
I knew him as Anthony DeVolder from Queens.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
I compare him to the Tinder swindler.
From people who know him, the truth, the facts, the lies.
He would say that he was worth $100 million.
It's an incredibly cynical episode in American politics, beyond satire.
Had you ever seen anything like this?
No, and I hope I never see it again.
Campaign of Deceit, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She dazzled on the court and off the court as a businesswoman. Thank you for joining us on Person to Person. Tennis superstar and entrepreneur Serena Williams.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
I asked my students, what are we going to do about racism in the United States?
The backlash over teaching about racism in American schools.
I don't think it has any place in the classroom.
We can either pretend and say, no, we're not racist and we're all great people, or we can actually start to do the really, really hard work of addressing it.
How did you lose your job?
I made the statement that white privilege is a fact.
Is it helping diversity and inclusion?
When you bring in different people's stories and experience, it enriches education.
If you don't talk about something, it doesn't go away.
Or driving us further apart?
What schools are doing to our children in the name of anti-racism is in fact teaching them racism.
The intention is to put us in this war against each other.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction, with the Democratic-appointed justices tending to go in another.
Even though it's only 9 justices, it takes 5 of them to make the law of the land.
Does it have political impact? True. Political intent? Probably not true.
If the American people don't trust the judgment of their court, that's a real problem for our democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
On our places, bright shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team. I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Welcome back to America Decides. An historic impeachment trial involving Texas's Attorney General is now underway. Ken Paxton is facing multiple accusations of bribery, obstruction of justice, and misusing power. Representatives for the state and for Paxton made their opening statements on Tuesday.
Mr. Paxton should be removed from office because he failed to protect the state and instead used the power of his elected office for his own benefit. When we are done, I believe that no matter your party affiliation and no matter where you stand now, you will conclude what I have concluded, that there is nothing to this.
CBS News correspondent Janet Shamlian joins us from Houston, Texas. Hi, Janet. Thank you for being with us.
Nancy, it's great to be with you today. Thanks.
So walk us through this very unusual impeachment trial, what happened on day one, and remind us of the conduct that led to this trial in the first place.
Yeah, so basically, Attorney General Ken Paxton asked for $3 million of taxpayer money to help settle a lawsuit. A number of staffers claimed that they were wrongfully terminated for being whistleblowers. After that, the Texas House started looking into his behavior and reportedly found an incident of bribery involving a big donor, protecting that donor from an FBI investigation in exchange for favors. So in May, the Texas House voted to impeach him. And since that time, he has been suspended, Nancy, without pay.
You know, what's interesting about Paxton is that unlike Trump, he wasn't impeached just by Democrats. He was also impeached by the Republican-led state House. His own party wants him gone. So why hasn't the party closed ranks around Paxton the way it has around Donald Trump?
Well, some have, but not a majority. And this is one of those rare cases in politics, you would know better than most, of, sort of trying to hold one of their own accountable. Yes, it's rare, but so many people, Republicans in the state House and the state Senate, feel that his behavior has been so egregious that he needs to be out of office. And it's not just his behavior here. You know, he's facing other charges, criminal charges of securities fraud outside of what's being brought here in the state legislature.
Right. And this is obviously the person who's tasked with upholding the laws in the state, now accused of making an end run around some of them. Now, at the end of this impeachment trial, the state senators are going to take a vote. So what's the threshold for removing him from office?
Yeah, so the House already voted to impeach him, right? That's why it's in the Senate. There are 16 articles of impeachment. They only need a 2/3 vote on one of those articles to get him out of office. There are 12 Democratic votes that seem a sure thing. There are 19 Republican senators, so they only need 9 Republican votes to impeach on one of those 16 articles. And there's some belief that they have that, at least on one of the articles of impeachment. That said, there is money flowing into Texas on billboards in the newspaper from big GOP donors, reaching out to a small audience of those 19 senators, telling them to stay the party line.
And yet it really feels like anything could happen. I mean, the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, is overseeing this impeachment trial. He's a big Paxton ally, right? And then you've got this complication that Paxton's wife is actually a member of the state Senate and is sitting in on this trial.
Yeah, you almost couldn't make it up. Dan Patrick is serving as, quote, judge in this trial, although he does not have a vote. He is an ally of Paxton. He said in the opening statements this morning, he said, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a judge, but I've got somebody here, a former judge, to help me through it. He will not be casting a vote on this. And you're right, his wife, Paxton's wife, Angela Paxton, is a state senator. She had intended to cast a vote in this proceeding until the Texas Senate said, you have a conflict of interest, that's not going to happen. But she is still there today in the chamber, and she will be hearing testimony about Paxton's alleged mistress and extramarital affair. So it's very odd.
Yeah, it is, to say the least. You know, this is not the first brush with scandal for the AG. As you pointed out, he was indicted by a grand jury back in 2015 on securities fraud charges. What can you tell us about where that case stands right now, 8 years later?
Yeah, it's hard to believe someone who is not in politics, right, could wait 8 years and not have come to trial. The charges are very serious. If he is convicted, he could face up to 99 years in prison. This has been delayed. There's been requests for change of venue. The last ruling was that it will be held here in Houston. There's a next court hearing in October, and at the October court hearing, a date for that trial will be decided, but it will certainly not come before this impeachment proceeding is finalized.
So how long do we anticipate this impeachment trial is going to last?
Well, I can tell you by watching today, it's not going very quickly. They did not get to opening statements until this afternoon. They had to swear in every senator separately. And on motions this morning, they had to ask everybody as if they were on a jury twice if they agreed, if that was indeed their vote. So the estimates are between 1 and 3 weeks. Most people say sometime in the next 2 weeks. The senators prayed this morning at the opening of the session that their lives would continue while they were in this lengthy process.
Well, no matter how this turns out, it will be fascinating to watch. Janet Shamlian, thank you so much for breaking it all down for us.
Thanks, Nancy.
And that does it for today. You can stream America Decides Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. For now, you're streaming CBS News. Thanks for watching.
It's a history-making meeting. 4 extraordinary women who are all 4-star generals and admirals.
How did you deal with being discriminated against?